We're now going to take a quick look at the properties controls in CircuitWorks. The CircuitWorks tree view, as well as being used to locate components in the preview image, can also be used to interact with the data in the preview image. Let's show a quick example. If I expand out the components section of the SOLIDWORKS tree and select the buzzer. Now if you recall, this buzzer that we looked at in the last video is a 2D component. It has no height. That's why it's shown with this small exclamation mark on the component, and why it's shown as a wireframe, unlike the other components which are shown as solids, because they have a height. So again, if I zoom in, you can see it's a simple wireframe component. If I right click the buzzer control and select properties, the component properties window will be displayed. Now these are the properties of the buzzer itself. I can see it has a name of this. I could change the buzzer's name, I could change its part number, whether it's built or whether it's taken from the CircuitWorks component library, if it's an electrical or mechanical component, and I can also change its component height. So if I use the little up and down arrows, I can give it a height. Let's give it a height of 5mm. And you'll see as I do that, in the background, the preview image changes to display a solid component rather than a wireframe component, as it now has a height, and the buzzer is now shown without the exclamation mark icon, as this component now has a height of 5mm. It's no longer 0 height. So if I go back down to 0mm, again it turns wireframe, we get the exclamation mark. If I take the height back up to 5mm, I don't have to use millimeters. Obviously CircuitWorks can be set to use thou imperial units. In this case I'm just using millimeters because it's a metric file. But again, you can see we've now given the component a height of 5mm. As well as changing the properties of a component, we can also change the properties of a component instance. That's its particular instance on the board. You could have, for example, one component that's 10 mil high, such as a coil component, which could be used 100 or 200 times on the board. So the component is 10 mil high, but its instances can all have different XY locations, different rotations, different reference designators. So if I expand out our buzzer component, in this case it's only got one instance. There's only one instance of that buzzer on the board, B301. If I click on that node, the component properties dialog on the right here changes to show the properties of the component instance. So I can see here's the reference designator, which I could change if I wanted to be another number. I can change its filter status, which we'll deal with later, whether it's an electrical or mechanical component. We've also got its board side, XY location and rotation angle. So for example, I could change its board side from the top of the board to the bottom of the board, and it disappears from the preview as it's moved to the back side of the board. If I change it back to the top, so the component reappears. I can also, for example, edit the rotation angle. Here it's 270 degrees. If I change it, you can see behind, so the component's angle is rotating as I change the rotation angle. So if I now close the window, you can see that the component's now at an angle. So if I were to save out the data at this point back to another IDF file, or to build a solid model of it in SolidWorks, in the case of CircuitWorks for SolidWorks here, the component would now be stored at that new angle. So I can update and change the data in the IDF or PADS file, modify it, and then save it out again as another IDF file, or build that data. The properties aren't just isolated to the components and the component instances. I can select any node, for example this components node here, and see all the properties of all the components. Because I've selected the components parent node, I get the properties of all the components just in one window, and I can sort these. So for example, if I wanted to sort by rotation angle, I could click on the header, or sort by board side, X position, so I could sort and get a preview of all the information for all the components. Again, exactly the same thing applies for plated holes, non-plated holes. All the information can be quickly sorted, quickly displayed, so I can see all the information about every entity in the file. So as well as getting the properties of information, the properties of components and entities in the IDF or PADS data, we can also use tools in CircuitWorks to filter that data out. So if we've got a messy file that contains information we don't need, maybe it came through with a stray drawing border from the ECAD system, or some notes we don't want, something like that, we can use the filtering tools inside CircuitWorks to filter those out and to clean up the data, and that's what we're going to be looking at next.